Thank you.
I got this, my man. After you, sir, I'll go ahead and take it. I'll take it. You're welcome.
So this exhibition, this kind of conversation started, what is it, even way longer than PST. I've known Tanya for many, many years, and so we kind of talked about doing some sort of an interaction, collaboration for a long time, and so PST came around. And so that's kind of how this idea came into fruit, and other curators came into play to make this possible. And so later on in the project, also Fowler Museum was, kind enough, and so to host this. And there's an extension of this exhibition in Santa Barbara at the Contemporary Museum of Santa Barbara. So the idea, what we're thinking a lot about, and specifically me thinking a lot about the aspect of the culture and how textile has been part of these, almost like a gathering space. And the aspect of it is what you see there on the screen. That's during Holy Week celebration in the community, where each corner, there's a specific streets that that's part of the procession within the community. And those corners are then being temporary altar, a religious space is then built by textiles. And they'll put an altar inside, and that's where they would welcome the procession, the image. There's a ceremony happens, they take a little break, and they can continue throughout the procession. So when we're thinking, I was thinking a lot about that place, and the curators and everybody else thought that was also an amazing thing to kind of build more like a space beyond just a gallery or just white walls. It's there like a space of coming together. And so what the pieces you see here represents the tradition and the culture. So it's like traditional Zapotec rugs and textiles, embroidery work. Many of these pieces are from the Fowler collection. And so this is a reference to these spaces that we're looking at, right? Originally, we were kind of thinking about how we could build these more of a gathering space. In our community too, there's a devotion room for every Catholic's home. When you come to their home, there's a devotion room, a space devoted for religious purposes. And so we were kind of thinking about that too, that's where people comes together and discuss important matters. And so the two pieces you see here, this is Tanya, Keith Danger, and then that bottle of water. It's called Cosas que Llevan. Because originally within our conversation has also been a deep conversation around migration, around also tourism, around contemporary tradition, and so many things that we have been thinking about. But me originally, and for a long time, I've been thinking a lot about the journey of migration. Those people, and especially Native people that continued to migrate and continue that migratorial journey as our ancestor has done, right? And so that bottle of water, it is some of the things, some essential things that we take with us when we migrate. Food, water, of course, some maybe religious images, the type of clothing we're wearing. There's certain protocols that we follow, everyone that's continued to migrate. And so that's a bottle of water. It's part of the essential things that we take with us. And I wove on the bottle of water because we take our culture with us where we go. It's not something we leave behind. It's not something we leave on the other side of the border. It's not something that makes us more or less. That's just who we are, and we carry that with us wherever we go, right? And that's what that is. And here, this is Tanya's piece, and she has obviously been engaging with cochineal insect in the different forms. It is a subject that has been in her interest as well. And this particular piece, it's called, well, this is Transmigration, or the Diaspora series of work. And this is a body of work, and mainly, the majority of my work, it's done through a series of works. And I started to make these series, work on these series about maybe like 2 years ago or so. This is the second within the series. First one was indigo, it was blue, and then the second one is cochineal insect. This is in the collection of, what is it, Tucson Art Museum. And so this particular series, I was thinking also, continue to thinking about migration, but how I could provide, as I was mentioning earlier, a real perspective what is migration. I think it is a subject that is very present, has been, especially now through the political changes and new election that's coming. It is like a present subject. And although we've heard so much about it, but again, we've only heard one side, we've always heard one side of the stories, right? And it could, one party could say the same, and we talk about closing borders, we talk about all these things. And so this body of work has given me an opportunity to take people back and talk about, so if you ask the Native Americans, right? If you ask them, what was it like, or what you thought has your ancestor migrated, right? So let's go back to 5,000 or 6,000 years, 7,000 years ago, to where our ancestors was interacting and migrating, and maybe you could say nomads throughout this land here. There's no disruption other than the climate and of course nature and so forth. But there's certain migratorial paths and ways that they have interacted with throughout the thousands of years. And so the minute you disrupt that, you're now creating mutation. You're now disrupting their lives and the way they exist, having existed these whole thousands of years. And so through the colonial period, what is it? I think 32 countries was established in the Americas. We've all been encapsulated in each country, right? You either end up being Mexico and your neighbor is United States. That's really how the line was drawn. But we're now then becoming criminalized if we attempt not to cross the border, if we attempt to continue the DNA journey of migration. So I am another native that continue the migration, not wanting to break the law. It is what we do. It is how we understand life, right? And so the monarch butterflies continue to do that because they need to do that in order to save their species. They've always done that. It takes about 3 to 4 generations leaving or departing northern United States, Canada, and spend the first winter in Mexico. Then from there, it'll take so many other generations to come home. Well, that completely illustrates of what I'm talking about, how the next generation knows where home is, right? I mean, if you could explain to me how they know where home is. And so what I'm doing, I'm just coming home, right? I'm just moving where home is to us. And we do that to save our species. We've always done that. And so each butterfly, it represents each immigrant and that continued this migration. The butterfly we saw earlier on my traditional one, I mean, not so traditional, but one of the traditional butterflies, how it's being used, right? And so that same concept of how the symbolism is used within the culture and the concept of migration. So I created this particular piece here. This is a tapestry weaving, and here's where I can illustrate what's functional, what's not functional. One, that it's completely idea driven and responding to an issue like migration. These are all archive pieces, and I think there's about 20 to 25 of my fine art pieces continue to be signed like my functional. Until recent months, I've changed that. So anyway, this is a piece that it's being woven. I wove a white canvas. Then the canvas was dyed with cochinilla. And I didn't dye the yarn, I dyed the canvas, right, a panel. And I needle felt the butterflies. So these butterflies has texture. If you come closer, you could see the relief on them.
So the dye effect, the sort of ombre it was all white and then
Yeah.
you created that.
Yes.
How did you attach the butterfly?
It's a needle felting technique.
Yeah, Can you tell me who the patron saint of the village is? In that video, is that your village?
The patron saint in our community is Sangre de Cristo. But what's being celebrated in the images here is during Holy Week.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's that particular piece there, and this is all cochineal insect. Someone just asked me a question out on the patio. Is it, what was the question? Do you add more cochineal, or how long you leave it to change from dark to lighter? No, not at all, because like here's a perfect example. It is the same amount of cochineal insect. It's just exposed to either iron, to either, in this particular case, exposed to pomegranate. That's what's darkened. Don't write that down. No, I'm just.
And when you say
Your
exposed,
secrets.
did you put it in a dye bath, or did you paint it beforehand, or how do you?
And so, thank you, and this is a beautiful thing that I can, before we move, I know there's just so much things.
Yeah.
So, these are some of the things in the last few years, especially as I'm continuing to free up my creative spirit. I'm not anymore bound to the market, tourism market. I'm not bound to completely perception anymore. I completely came out of the closet and say, this is who I am. And if I'm not exciting enough, I'm so sorry. I am moving on, right? And so these particular effects or bodies of work that completely has freed me, and I really do feel deeply about, I truly finding my soul. I'm connecting and healing and talking about subject that completely matters to me, and not just the completely beautiful Zapotec rugs. Instead, it is going back to the medium and the material and create a body, you could just call it a new myth. You could just call it a new stories of the indigenous people. And it has free how I approach the work. And so it is, felting technique, it is allowing me to, is it painting, is it what, am I mordanting this so I could create some effects? And so all these different things, if I could paint it, if I pour that, the pigment into it. So it's very much an approach as a conceptual contemporary artist that I'm looking to a place to get to because I have something to say.
Bravo.
Thank you. All right, so this is a piece that Tanya and I collaborated on. So this is again the butterfly, but as you can see, this is more of my functional work. And so through this exhibition and conversation, we'll just, start brainstorming and, incorporating some of these texture and element coming out of the butterflies. We want to just completely break the symmetrical shape, and so that's what that, the cotton you see there was dyed with cochineal. What you hear, this particular speaker, it is Mixteco and Zapoteco traditional welcome. So we welcome you in two different languages. I don't think this part is translated in Spanish. So here, before we burn our scarves, we don't want to forget the scarves. And these, so these three pieces is part of, I'll just probably stand here. So these three pieces here, it's part of the continuous line series of work, along with the one here behind you. I've always just been drawn, and someone told me earlier about my work, that it's very classy, that it's very minimal, that it's very simple. I've just always been that way. Hopefully you come and visit my studio or at home, which I do a lot of the work, it's completely minimal, you know. But to me, that's one of the hardest things. How can you create something powerful, but it's yet very simple? And so I have been looking at, since with my functional work, have been looking a lot in the grecas. For those of you that been to Oaxaca, that you see a lot in Mitla wall, the grecas, and what you see in the Zapotec cross. I've always been just fascinated about those forms, the movement, the lights, how the seasonality of lights and how the building is changing from the summer to the spring and so forth. And so I've been creating these series of work, continuous line, for a long time, for I don't know, also 4 years, I don't know. First few of the pieces was in Ojai at the Glasso Bailey Foundation. I'm a recipient of contemporary artist, I don't know, I think 4 years ago. And then I got invited to show at Chinari in Marfa. And so I continued that series of work. So I had a show there last year. Just ended this year actually in July. Continuous Line in Cosmos. And then Mexico City, one of the Barragan and Maxeto place in Mexico City. This piece was there. This piece came out, and I think it was, 7 new pieces within the series in Mexico City, and then 3 of them here. 3 new pieces in New York. My show that's open next week on the 8th at Salon 94 in New York. Anyway, I was really interested in the form and the texture, the steps. It's almost like just really meditating in one aspect and really take time to meditate. I think here's where my sensibility really flourished, which another parts of the sensibility could really affect you in other ways too. And so I think natural lighting, it works just perfectly because the subtlety and the richness. The majority of these pieces in the continuous line are either embroidered or they have a wrapped around texture to them. Some of these pieces, part of the design is on the loom, and the rest of it is done off the loom with the needle. So some of the texture, it's done on the loom or added later on to complete the design. For these pieces, I use a floor loom. So if you get close to it, like this one here, it has a texture. This line here, it's raised. And on the blue piece, the red, that's the raise, the texture, and that just separate or create another dimension. And these series, they're all framed, stretched and framed. It was very interesting to learn too about, learn a little bit more about modernism, right? Especially like here in Southern California, we're one of the epicenter of modernism. And so just study and learn a little bit about the artist that has made that, you know, the modernism culture, and we celebrate it through that. What was interesting is I found out that many were spending a lot of times in Oaxaca, right? Luis Barragan is one of them. Joseph Alvarez, they were in Oaxaca, I think, with the span of 3 or 4 years, 14 times. A lot of the work that Joseph Alvarez has been driven and inspired within the tradition in there. But also too, you know, when I think about, that's a new tradition that started. I do think about too that we don't play a role, as I mentioned earlier, we don't play a role within that circle. We're not celebrated within the circle. So individually celebration that happens there. But I also do think that me coming later on, many generations later, coming from the culture and learning about the rich and beautiful culture of modernism, which I appreciate and respect, that has also inspired, you know, in both sense, my ancestors and the modernism. But I really do hope in this kind of conversation and celebration, it's coming to fill in the holes that I do think, especially in that space, that there's an empty hole in there, and that these kind of work, it's coming to fill in and to bless you, and to strengthen that, because at this point it's not a, this type of work, it's not a research driven. This is how it's lived through time. Briefly, this is a piece that's called Unseen, a metal structure. I wove in between. The images are behind are the different minority community, the invisibility of communities in Ventura County. There's a lot of farm workers there from Oaxaca, indigenous from Oaxaca. And the visibility and the invisibility of them, depending if there's a political interest and so forth, they become invisible, but then they're gone again. But yet we see all our backyards, all the farm workers, they're responsible for our vegetables. And so as these wheel turns, you can see these images or not, it becomes visible, it becomes invisible. And this is the first time I wove something off the loom and use metal structure for that. I'll give you a few minutes if you could watch that video, and that's the piece that I did with it, and we'd love to hear from you. I think it's only 6 minutes. I'm gonna go stir our pot. What's that, buddy? Let's see if this one burns. Oh, thank you. Okay, get this stick, but it's just when you do it.
Yeah,
just
or you
pull
pick
it.
up one.
Just do this. There. Now it's hot.
So like you said, you want to keep all the store effects to absorb all the.
Here, what you can just pull it there so it's not as push it in. Let's see one. Lift one up. Nice and easy.
Try to get it.
Look at that. That's good.
It's really, really nice.
Just push it in.
You can really see the whole thing now.
let's do the same thing with the other spot.
My glasses.
Go ahead, buddy.
What's that? It's all blue.
It's more on magenta. Go ahead.
Oh yeah. Glasses.
How you doing?
How are you doing? Double thumbs.
Double. Okay.
So we bring one up?
No. Or unless you want to look at it, go ahead.
Yeah. And also, there's some over here that I didn't get because of the.
Okay, go ahead.
So Porfirio, I'm trying to sit and think about what you said about the borders and coming home and all the movement. And I was thinking, if you were saying that to Donald Trump, he wouldn't even know